Hey everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of Norham County. Today, I've set myself a challenge to design and construct a highway intersection that's not only efficient but also visually stunning. Instead of relying on traffic lights, we're going to implement a roundabout for the entrances and exit points with an underpass beneath it for the arterial road. And to really make it stand out, we'll give the highway above a sleek curved design around that roundabout. I will be pushing the limits of Cities Skylines II and use mods to help me bring this intersection to life. Plus, we'll be tapping into developer mode to access some additional assets that will take this project to the next level. If you're interested to what mods I'm using, I'll have a list on the description below. Alright, let's get building. The first thing we are doing is to upgrade our existing local highway in anticipation for future traffic and land development in this area. Let's start by demolishing this entire highway with its awkward roundabout connections. For the upgrade highway design, I'm thinking of it being elevated by the terrain rather than with support columns. I'm using the brush tool to select the nearby elevation where this highway will eventually connect to. I will then have it slowly slope back to the original highway section on the downtown side. Right now, I'm increasing the elevation of this terrain just so that these roads have just about enough clearance underneath the new highway. Now that the terrain foundation is laid out, you can see how this highway will eventually lead up to the hill on the right, and on the left, we will slope the terrain to connect back to the original highway. With the highway road tool, I like to use the 0.5 spacing in parallel mode for a cleaner and tighter aesthetic. And using the road guide snapping filter, we can make sure that our new highway is perfectly parallel with the industrial zone's roads. You can see how the terrain foundation we have just set makes it easy for us to place the highway while perfectly clearing the existing arterials. To clean up the terrain here a little bit, we will use the slope tool by right-clicking the top of the highway and then left-clicking from the bottom where you want the slope to start. Alternatively, you can also use the smooth terrain tool to achieve a similar result. And of course, let's apply the same method on the other side of the highway. At this point, it should look something like this. As you can see, it have a much more natural aesthetic to it, rather than a regular elevated highway. With that said, let's connect our road back to the original. After fiddling with this connection for an hour or two, I decided that it is best to leave this section elevated with structural columns instead of the terrain. The reason being is that it will give us enough space to work with for a cool intersection design. One thing that I love about this game is that you don't always have to follow the original plan. If you have a different design idea that you want to implement it, don't be afraid to destroy or redo sections of your city to make it work. In my case, this elevated section inspired me to create the cool intersection I'm about to show you how to make. What I'm doing here is laying out where the arterial road will go underneath the highway. I'm trying to make sure it is almost perpendicular to the curve that is already established. Although it is showing as 90 degrees here, it is not exactly correct, so I'm going to just eyeball it instead. After that, I'm going to remove the highway section above so I have more space to work with for this intersection. We can always reconnect the roads later. I'll start by drawing some outlines with the alley road. I tried my best to estimate where the center point of this area would be. This will be crucial for our next step. This area that I'm marking will be inset about 10 meters below elevation to create the underpass. After that, I place the arterial road down the terrain where we inset. This will be the start of a custom intersection that we are going to build. I also extended the arterial equally on both ends just a little bit. what we want to do now is tighten up the terrain such that it butts against the road. This will help us dictate retaining walls that will be built on either side of this underpass. The next step is adding a 4-lane highway on the ground elevation that splits the road equally. I'm placing it right on the center using the units on either side. As you can see, I count 7 units on either side of this road we just placed. I set the elevation to 30 feet and added a set of 4-lane highway above the arterial and perpendicular to the road we placed. Reason being is that I want to add a large roundabout for this intersection in a short while. We want to make sure that the new road we just added is perfectly flat with 0% slope. Once that is established, I will use the 1-lane highway tool as a guide to trim off the excess roads I placed. I started by counting 2 units over the perpendicular road and draw it 90 degrees across such that it creates a node that helps me remove the excess. Then, I widened the terrain at the underpass just a little so I can use the same technique to trim off the excess as well. Here, I'm establishing the starting points of where I want my underpass to slope up. After that, I will use the 1-lane highway tool again and measure how far I want the slope to be. I measure about 100 yards, or if you're not from the great land of the free, that will be 91 meters. At this point, you can remove the guides I've placed earlier and draw the 100 yards measurement to the other side as well. I also drew a perpendicular guideline from the end of the 100 yards to establish where the top of the ramp would be. Do this to both sides. Now I will select the slope terrain tool and slope both ends of the arterial to create the perfect ramp. I will right click the top of the guide I've made and then left click and drag it from where I want it to start to all the way back up, just like this. This will help us create a nice ramp without the terrain being unpredictable and out of whack. I also widened the terrain on the underpass even more and redrew the perpendicular highway above so that it will nicely transition from the terrain to the elevated section. This will also help the roundabout that we will place to work. Nice. This is looking really good already. I will now remove all the guides that I've created and then tighten up the terrain to the roads we've just made. The next order of business is building the entrance and exits to the roundabout. I used a 2-lane highway and started with it being as close to the arterial as possible. Make sure they are perfectly parallel. As you can see, this will also create the retaining walls. Don't worry about the length of them just yet, as we will adjust and connect them to the main road later on. Now I can remove the 4-lane highways above the arterial since we no longer need them. The roundabout will not be removed if you do it this way. Then I will connect the 2-lane highways diagonally to one another, perfectly creating a center point above the underpass. Don't forget to adjust the travel direction as well. At this point, you can use this intersection as is. I designed this because I really do not like how the road tunnels look in this game currently, especially in an underpass like this. If you do it this way, you will be able to see underneath the tunnel and through to the other side, making a more realistic look to it. To make the entry points from the highway above, let's start by using the 4-lane highway on either side of this roundabout. Placing the first road down will make the roundabout funky, but it will fix itself when putting the road on the other side. Then I will connect the entry and exits from the highway to the intersection, doing the same to the other side as well. And finishing the highway above, curving it around the roundabout to create a unique aesthetic. Finally, modify the arterial and create smooth entrances and exits. I used the 8-lane road transitioning into a 4-lane to create dedicated lanes entering and exiting the intersection. Don't forget to do the same to the other end as well. I also removed pedestrian crossing and traffic lights as it is not needed anymore. With the intersection finished, I will now take it to another level by detailing it using mods and developer mode. With the help of the line tool and Anarchy mods, I added the concrete barrier asset from the developer mode to the median of this road. The yellow and black striping of the barrier really brings a nice contrast to the rather gray and dull looking road. After adding grass sidewalks and median with trees, I filled up the rest of the concrete median with bushes. I also added some flowers along the barrier to give it a more filled look. I did explore the idea of adding trees at the concrete median, but most of the trees were either too wide or too tall. As there were also a sidewalk in the underpass, it makes the most sense to add another concrete barrier at the edge of those. At the enter and exit ramps, I did not like how the retaining wall have a section of the terrain showing through. I had an idea of using the boulders as a textured finish at these sides. In the developer mode, I selected boulder random and placed each boulder on the face of the retaining wall. I tried to align the flat face of each boulder as neatly as possible so that it gives the look of a wall facade. For areas that are too small to place the boulders, I use the rock assets to fill in the gaps, and then at the ends, I pile it with a series of bushes to make it have a finishing touch. And finally, I added some large and small bushes in random areas inside the boulders to make it look like as if there were vines and moss coming out of them. This will add a new dimension of character to the facade. Once I was done with this section, I did the same to the rest of the retaining walls. also added tall grass and bushes at the sides of the highway with a series of random boulder placements. I filled out these areas with wildflower bushes, and for finishing touches, I added 2 types of trees around this area. And here it is, a highly detailed and unique intersection that you can also add to your city. Not only will this intersection give you an efficient traffic flow, but also create a nice focal point to your city. I hope you can utilize some of the techniques I use in this intersection and create your own unique one as well. If you like this video, please leave me a like, subscribe, and give any comments for any suggestions or questions. Thank you!